Hello and welcome to the Good Society Forum. My name is Emma Skye and I'm Director of Yale World Fellows and co-host of the Good Society Forum, which is a community of change makers around the world with a common quest to build the good society. My co-host is Nizamuddin, a 2019 Yale World Fellow and a dedicated advocate for social mobility and community integration across the globe. Niz.
Thanks, Emma, and hello, everybody. Happy 2021. It's our first webinar of the new year, and we're so grateful that you have joined us today and for being part of our community that has been going now since April 2020 in our quest to build the good society. Most importantly, I hope you're all safe, healthy, and well, along with your loved ones during these testing times for us all. Please do follow us on our social media platforms and share what you learned today. We'd love for you to continue being part of our online community. We're on Twitter at GoodSoc Forum. We're on LinkedIn, as well as on Facebook, where we have a Facebook page, which we would love for you to like. If you have ideas for Good Society Forum sessions and want to be a panelist, please let us know, info@goodsocietyforum.com. Today, the plan is to hear from our speakers. We're delighted to have a number of speakers today, and then we will take your questions thereafter. We're very, very keen for you to participate, as we always are. And so we want to find out where everybody is tuning in from today. So on the chat, we're on the chat function, which you'll have at the bottom of your screen. If you want to just let us know, which city are you currently in, and where are you tuning in from? So we thank you so much for sharing already. So we have Ahmed from Canterbury in Kent. We have Layla from Mexico City, Jumana from Lebanon, Janice, hi Janice from Rochdale, Farah from London, love these talks. We do too, thank you so much for joining us. Jess from London, Bushra, oh, brilliant to have you, Bushra, thank you. Bill, who's currently fixed in London. It sounds like you're not happy about that. I know you like to travel the world, Bill. Laura, hi Laura. Rhonda from Westchester in New York. We have Malcolm from Ayr in Scotland. We have Gary from Nottingham University, Francine from London. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so thrilled to have this global community that we can always rely on to join us and to share our experiences with. So, and we have hi, Ali, we're just going to turn off your camera and get you to join us later on. Thank you so much. So Emma, what are we going to be talking about today?
So young people can have a powerful and positive impact when they find their voice and a sense of purpose. However, many young people feel disempowered by the systems and structures that are intended to support them. And young people's mental well-being is a serious and growing concern everywhere, and further exacerbated by lockdowns. So today we're going to explore the importance of developing trusting relationships with young people to empower them to find their voice and to make choices about their own lives, and ultimately to contribute to building the good society. So our first speaker today is Sugra Ahmed, Director of Education at the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Organization. And she was previously Associate Dean for Religious Life at Stanford University, where she taught and led pastoral care to students and staff on campus. She's a research associate at St. Edmund's College, Cambridge, and a trustee of the Islamic Society of Britain, where she previously served as chair. She's a member of the Advisory Council of the Cambridge Institute on Religion and International Studies, Clare College in the UK. And in 2014, she was awarded the Noor Inayat Khan Memorial Award for Muslim Woman of the Year at the British Muslim Awards. Sugra has a BA in English Language and Literature, an MA in Islamic Studies, a diploma in Islamic Jurisprudence, and is a qualified chaplain. But most importantly, Sugra is a 2016 Yale World Fellow. Sugra, great to see you. Over to you.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Nez. And yes, of all of those achievements, I'm most proud of the Yale World Fellows program because it was so transformational. as is the work that I'm doing with young people, which I'm just going to take a few minutes to share a little bit about. We know that education is a critical step in building a good society. And in my work, building power and agency in young people through human rights education is really important. There are two particular groups in education, and my work empowers both of these, teachers and students, so that collaboratively we create transformative cultures across schools and therefore communities, releasing the power young people have in the world of today and, of course, tomorrow. So our mission at Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights UK in our Speak Truth to Power program is to create school cultures where human rights are a major driving force and common language which build the human qualities and skills young people need to believe in human rights, to act on those human rights and develop the resilience, the confidence and the agency that they will need in a fast-moving world. Speak Truth to Power is a free of charge human rights education program firmly located in the lives and realities of today's students. And above all, it speaks to the human skills that underpin these human rights, which can empower us to overcome our divisions, reject hatred for compassion, move from despair to hope, and take the actions that can make human rights a reality for all in society without exception. We have a theory of change, which is the bedrock of our entire educational program. We start really deep with people's mindsets, with their attitudes and their behaviors, exploring how teachers and students see the world and their place within that world. We take them on a journey, beginning with where they are currently at the moment that we meet them. This starting point is important because we use it to build action, which then leads to creating cultural and curricular transformations rooted throughout the school. Our theory of change is called Mindsets for Change, which we created with artists, activists, child psychologists, and of course, teachers. This framework, divided into 4 areas called purpose, compassion, complexity, and hope, sets out the human qualities and skills young people need to believe in human rights. It is a language to help young people connect with the world and resonates deeply with teachers like Jill Tuffy, the deputy head teacher from Mulberry Girls High School in London, who had a deeply emotional reaction when we shared with her our Mindsets for Change. And of course, Janice, who is here on this call today, Janice Allen, head teacher at Failinge Park High School, attributes a drop in aggressive language and behavior to programs like Speak Truth to Power at her school. This learning outcome is about how, whether teacher or student see their agency in relation to their place in the world, and we focus on the hyper-local. We focus on how they see their relationships with themselves, this is purpose, with other people, developing compassion, and with the world around them, the complexity that lies within that world, and develop their vision for the future. This is hope. So, thinking about purpose for a second, just consider this in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement. What does it mean for young people to be self-aware, whether a Black person, a person of color, a white person, whatever categories you can think of? What do ideas around responsibility, institutions, and relationships with authority mean to each of us depending on the color of our skin? It's questions like these, as well as explorations of privilege and the power that we might have in today's world, which encourages our young people to build on the tipping point that we are at right now. They feel good about honest, authentic classroom learning on critical issues unfolding around them. They feel their power and agency when classroom learning then leads into activism and they can do something meaningful about the injustices they experience either firsthand or witness through their family and friends. Complexity. For our young people, the idea of accepting multiple truths, especially at a time when we are experiencing populism, is important. Because people have a different understanding of history, how we've all come to be in the different places that we are, in our feeling of belonging and connection to our towns, to our cities, to our countries, to our world. Given the debates and protests about statues we've had here in the UK, we clearly have some work to do in unpacking multiple truths, taking a step back and exploring the wider picture. And this is what we strive to enable our students and teachers to do through Speak Truth to Power. We provide a number of classroom resources for Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, which root human rights firmly in the real lives of these students. Our resources are creative, they're all about experiential journeys, taking students from developing their understanding of themselves all the way to developing their agency and stepping into their power in the world. Each resource has activities and materials, including mindfulness at the end of every lesson. After all, human rights is quite a heavy thing for anybody to learn. And at the end of every lesson, we prescribe that the teacher engages in a deep mindfulness activity so that young people leave the classroom feeling good in their own skin, feeling comfortable. Our resources can be taught across different subjects in different formats, with space for teachers and schools to help tailor it to their specific context and their immediate need. And for Failinge Park at one point, this need was about dealing with toxic behaviour in the school and at the school gates, when people from outside of the school would seek to negatively influence young people. Ultimately, that impacts the school and it impacts the wider community. So our resources root human rights firmly in the lives of students, covering local struggles for human rights activists, human rights leaders, and how people together can make change. I can share a little more with you later if it's relevant about each of our resources and what they seek to do, but I do want to touch upon teacher training. This is really important. Teachers often are at the behest of whatever whatever discipline they graduated with from university, and rarely get the opportunity to engage in deep personal and professional development training in the way that we're providing. So our ambition is to build a generation of change makers who transform people into human rights leaders in the classrooms, in the school, and in the communities. And so we work deeply with each layer of people in a school, including these teachers who are anything from entry level all the way to senior leadership and head teachers. Building on existing skills to enlighten and empower a generation of teachers, we want to help them understand their own values, how to live in alignment, how to live out their values and embody those behaviors authentically in their professional spaces, so that they can begin a ripple effect, impacting their colleagues, their students, parents, and of course, the surrounding communities. Finally, we believe in the ripple effect that was spoken about by Robert F. Kennedy, who in 1966 at the University of Cape Town said, "Each time a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope." These ripples of hope are continuing today through the young people in our schools, through the teachers in those schools. By learning to be compassionate, they are able to hold multiple truths. They're able to become strategic and impactful, which means that they have often written to elected officials, they've organized local marches, they've presented at assemblies about a range of issues, including the ongoing refugee crisis, racism, sexism, homophobia, and much, much more. They embody human rights language in their everyday interactions. One teacher told me a story, I think actually it was at Failinge, where she was on playground duty and a young boy came running up to her and said, Miss, there's a conflict happening around the corner. And she went to attend to that group. There was a fight that was about to break out. And instead of using language like that or standing with the rest of the crowd chanting, as many of us might remember from our school days, fight, 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 that young person chose to embrace the speak truth to power language that they'd been teaching in the classroom and sought to diffuse the situation.
Sugra, thank you so much. That sounds absolutely incredible. And we will hear more from Sugra shortly, and we're going to share into the chat function a link to the work that Sugra and the team are doing at RFK Human Rights in the UK. It now gives me really great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Lucy Stevens, the director and co-head teacher of the New School, a democratic school in Upper Norwood in South London. With experience gained from a background in teaching, a degree in social psychology, nutritional therapy, and herbal medicine, time spent working at the Prince's Trust with marginalized young people, and having 2 children of her own, Lucy has focused her attention on what a school model of education could look like when it's structured in a way that values equity, inclusion, and young people's voice in decision-making. The new school is a charity enabling the school to create a non-fee paying, equitable alternative educational model in action, which is what we are all about at the Good Society Forum, where Lucy and her team put research into practice and generate broader social and emotional outcomes. Lucy, so thankful to you. Of course, you've helped us put this webinar together, so we're especially grateful and can't wait to hear from you.
Brilliant, thank you. It's great to be here tonight talking about a subject that I'm very passionate about, and one that's been central to the founding of the new school, which is a newly created democratic school in South London. So firstly, I want to talk a little bit about young people's voice and why it's important. Then I'll give some examples of what we actually do at the new school. And finally, I'll explain why building strong relationships is crucial for supporting young people's voice, and why this is vital for shaping society. So young people often find themselves in systems and structures that are disempowering, boring, irrelevant to their lives, or unsupportive to their needs. And historically and still today, young people often have things done to them, whether it's education, medical procedures, behaviour techniques. And not only does it create lasting social problems, exclusion, school to prison pipelines, mental health crises, or lack of motivation for learning, but it also doesn't support the development of the next generation to find a sense of purpose, a sense of identity, or a sense of collective belonging that leads to social change. So we need to enable a transformation within schools and homes and society to more partnership-based relationships. And by enabling young people's voices to be heard, we support the next generation with that sense of agency and social responsibility, with young people that can share opinions as well as listen to others, and ability to work collaboratively to affect change. And so to change this in society, we need this to happen from the ground up. We first need our education system to embed this within its values and its culture, not just in a tokenistic way, but fully integrated into the ethos of our schools. So far, so simple, right? So it was with these principles in mind that I founded the new school. And we thought it would be easy. Well, I thought it would be easy to bring young people's voice into the school, and it's not. The reality of being on the ground with our young people and navigating the lens shift that needs to happen to enable young people's voice, it takes a lot of self-reflection on the part of the adult, and figuring out how to embed youth voice into the democracy of our school so that it isn't tokenistic is a constant challenge that we work on, because youth voice isn't just a case of having a school council or having a young person give feedback on a proposal that's actually already been decided, so it's just tick box exercise, and then we just carry on as we were. So one of the ways this looks different in our school is our system of decision making, which is called sociocracy. So topics of interest, whether it's assessment, social activism, gardening, have a meeting, or we call it a circle. And the power is given to that circle to make decisions. And within that circle, we speak in rounds. So everyone takes a turn to speak, and it allows space to listen to those that are before you. And knowing you've got your space to have a say means you can sit back and listen to what somebody else has to say. Another way we enable young people's voice is through our approach to managing conflicts and harm. So we work with restorative circles, which is a process where young people and staff too, when it involves them in a conflict with young people, come together to hear each other out, to reflect back what they've heard, and to work to understand each other's perspectives. And when each party feels heard, we work to identify the needs and a mutual solution in order to move forward. It's not always a quick process, but if it's done well, it should leave each party feeling like the relationship can move forward and the community is brought back together. And then I think one of the most crucial things that we do is to really get to know young people at our school. So we find time each week to check in one-to-one, to chat over lunch, to play a game in self-directed time, and to listen, to really understand what's going on for each young person. It's saying, hey, I noticed you're having trouble concentrating today, what's up? which is very different from why were you staring out the window and drawing on your notepad while I was trying to talk to you. And it's this check-in process that's also true for us as educators. So we're in this constant dialogue with each other about how we can work with young people and work as a team, which enables us to build the relationships that are needed to really empower and support each other. There's many tensions too, which we hold, and it's important that we keep bringing those out into the open, so we constantly challenge ourselves in our practice. For example, do we see young people who are confident, articulate, clear in their message as a marker of success of youth voice? And perhaps we wrongly assume that those who are quieter, who maybe pass when it's their turn to speak or have a different presentation style, do we see them as voiceless? Or do we really hold that space that supports different ways of participating? Another tension, do we really understand inclusion and difference and know each person well enough to understand their point of view so that they're fully included in their learning and have a voice in that? And do we facilitate a space that, on the one hand, enables young people to challenge, to question, to find their voice, but also protects others in that space from harm that may come from unfiltered expression of voice? Now, some of these ideas are unusual within education today because it goes against that conventional understanding of the teacher as an authority figure, and reimagining a role in education for this type of relational working isn't always easy. But actually at the New School, we see that authoritarian role as a barrier. And so we work to foster a partnership relationship with young people. So we don't use Mr. and Mrs. We dress in a way that we feel comfortable. We allow young people to make jokes and to have fun and to play games with us, because that's what you do in a relationship. And it's checking our tone and our way of speaking. You know, do we speak as an equal, or do we use a child speaking voice? But we also hold the adult role and not that of a peer. So with that increased level of familiarity comes the privilege of hearing more about young people and their thoughts and their needs, and enables us to listen and respond to that voice. And actively for us, actively listening, reflecting builds trust, and it creates engagement in learning, and it creates a positive culture within our school, equipping young people to carry those ideas into the future. So one where many opinions matter and dialogue can happen despite difference. So for us, it's not enough to just call for young people to have a voice. As adults, we have a responsibility to listen, hear, and respond to that voice. Otherwise, it's just a hollow call. And in education, in institutions, in homes, meaningful and practical recognition of young people and a constant critical reflection on the part of educators and parents and those in youth work and anyone in a position of authority and power to really hear young people's voice. And if we want equity in society, then we believe it has to be modelled. Thank you.
Well, Lucy, thank you very much, and a big shout out for the work that you're doing with the New School. I think we all look back and think, wow, to go to a school like that, how amazing. So our third speaker is Kaylee Wainwright, who's Director of Engagement at UK Youth. And Kaylee has 15 years experience in the youth sector, starting her journey as a member of her local youth club, and is now responsible for developing and implementing a range of services and support for youth organisations across the UK youth movement, and communicating challenges, current trends, and best practice to external stakeholders and decision makers. She's a qualified youth worker with a passion for developing projects that bring communities together and supporting young people to have their voices heard. Kaylee, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi everyone, and thanks so much, Emma and the team for having me this evening. It's so great to be here amongst people who feel equally as passionate about this as I do. As Emma said, yeah, my name's Kaylee. I'm Director of Engagement at UK Youth. I'm really passionate about this topic, and that's mainly because I've had the opportunity and experience to experience it as a young person quite some time ago now, but I feel really passionately that actually enabling young people to have their voice in their own lives, and then have the opportunity to take part in local activism, national and international activism really supports the whole premise of building a good society, helps to develop other skills that might not have been initiated at the start, and it's just such a fantastic experience. I just thought it'd be helpful to share a little bit about UK Youth and our foundations and how we embed young people in the work that we do. So UK Youth is a national organisation that has a vision of ensuring that all young people are equipped to have the skills and confidence to thrive in whatever they choose to do, and also to make that real positive contribution in their own lives and with others. And how we do that is we work through the UK Youth Movement, which is a network of over 8,000 youth organisations around the UK. And we essentially understand what young people are experiencing through our engagement with them and with youth workers on the ground. And we use them insights to advocate with them on their and with youth organisations for the needs of young people and the sector. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about youth work as a methodology and how that really puts young people at the heart of decision making. So youth work is a mechanism that really meets young people where they are at. It puts young people at the heart of their communities, and it's based on voluntary participation and 4 key principles, which are education, empowerment, equality, and participation. So particularly around these issues, youth work really helps young people to develop the skills and confidence to make decisions and act on issues that affect their own lives, the lives of others, the communities and society. It also enables young people to take control and have a voice and get involved as advocates. Youth work happens in many different spaces, from open youth clubs that are run in local community centres, in church halls, in faith-based organisations, in scout huts, in lots of different settings, in schools as well. And the methodology is based on these core principles, and youth work relationships are underpinned by these. At UK Youth, all of the work that we deliver is formed around this methodology and supporting youth workers to deliver this work with young people. And the aim of it really is to empower young people to have those informed choices so that they feel empowered and can take control of the decisions that are most important and effective to them. And often the relationship between a young person and a youth worker is based on an equality of power in terms of the relationship. And often for a lot of young people, it's the first time that they have ever experienced that, because it is a voluntary relationship, and that enables the trust to build between the young person and the adult, the trusted adult. And that through that, the young people can start to begin to see the potential they have to make change. So from a really simple thing, such as being asked, you know, what are their goals? What do they want to do in next week's youth club session? That really starts to help young people think about, oh, I have a decision in this, I have ownership of this, and they can start to think about where, you know, what are their strengths and how do they want to build on that. And we use that as a premise in developing our programs, in our outdoor learning spaces, in everything that we do. In addition to the work that we do in this area, where we see young people taking more ownership of their own decisions, and then going on to developing social action projects, taking part in volunteering, and then potentially campaigning on big national organisations, we also see through this that actually young people get extra benefits from having taken part in this approach. And we see things such as, and we've got evaluation and data on this, that sees an increase in confidence, self-esteem, a real sense of belonging, and it enables young people to build skills in leadership, things like project management, entrepreneurship, and that actually really helps young people to be to have transferable skills for the future. And we know through research that actually if people in society feel a sense of belonging in their communities, that actually it's a good trait in terms of building a good society that works well for everyone, that's accessible. I wanted to bring to life some of the work that we've been doing, that we do with young people. In terms of UK youth, we have young people at the heart of all of our decision making. We don't do anything in terms of designing a program without having young people in the room. 30% of our trustees are young trustees, and we feel really strongly that this is that's sort of the approach that we take to everything. So we'll go into conversations with government, with funders, with externals, and we won't often be there without young people. And that's some of the principles that we embed throughout the organisation. And in the programs, we often have quite light touch programs so that young people won't necessarily know that they're signing up to be on a youth voice panel, for example, and because actually that's not accessible to everyone. It's not what everyone wants to do. But through the program, they then start to engage and then end up becoming quite involved in some activism work or some campaigning work. And for a few years now, we've been running a program called Empower, which is a program for young women and girls, particularly in the most deprived areas, that looks at building leadership skills and developing peer mentors with young women, and really helping them to feel a sense of belonging in their community. And I just wanted to share a short video that actually we got sent from the program a couple of days ago from one of the young women who wanted to share her voice around what's been happening with the pandemic, and also just thinking about the element of trust. You'll see kind of snippets in that. Actually, if we don't build that trust with young people, how it really makes young people feel disempowered and the impact it can actually have on society more generally. So I'm hoping my tech's going to work. It's only a couple of minutes long, so I will put this on and yeah, let you enjoy.
The mystery of thousands, empty promises, deceptive acts of so-called solidarity. The global pandemic that reminded us just how expendable and replaceable we, the young people, are. In that second I was scared. During the age of a global pandemic, the world faces a lot of uncertainty. A world run by seemingly responsible adults in positions of high power, charged with tackling the virus and setting things right. As the months drag on, instructions become unclear. Incompetence, indecision and false hope from those who we trusted. We young people have constantly been at the bottom of the food chain, always getting the short end of the stick. How many times have we been told that it's our place to start at the bottom, to support and idolise our elders? But I have never ever heard so much as a thank you. We put our lives and our health on the line. We do our jobs, the vital but underpaid work that keeps things moving, even when our own personal lives are struggling. Don't we deserve to be heard? Don't we deserve to be recognised? Students told to go home months earlier than planned. Disruption, anger, confusion. Saying goodbye to the supposed job-landing education while collecting debts of £9,250 a year. No refunds, no compensation. Then on the front lines, head down doing our bit to pull together. Unthanked, poorly paid, and then being blamed for the return of the virus after the government cheered Eat Out to help out. We, the young people, will not be the scapegoats. We are not a cheap card to be played for an easy exit. Together, we held up a country when it needed us most. Why are you gambling with our future? Why put our lives on the line and treat us as expendable? Why play with our lives and our livelihoods and act as if they don't matter? We have been let down by those who we should trust. Those who are supposed to protect us. In a time of unprecedented events, our country crumbles and our so-called arm-in-arm solidarity is nowhere to be found. Our future, your future, the world's future. It relies on us. We are the future.
Hopefully everybody heard that there. And yeah, I just wanted to say that, yeah, there's just really good example of a young person who never would have expected themselves to be doing something like that, has been engaged, built that trust via youth work, and has now been able to share their voice and feels more empowered by doing that. And the last thing I just wanted to say was actually, how much power and trust are we willing to give young people, and actually to really change the dial in this space. It's something that we all need to do collectively. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kaylee, and thank you for sharing with us that video and really helping to amplify the voice of young people. Now, our next speaker is Jo Wells. Jo has worked in the voluntary sector for over 20 years, both in international humanitarian aid overseas and in the UK. She lives in Essex and is the mother of 2 teenage boys. As well as working on global frontline operations in natural disasters and conflict, she managed a policy team, has led research and been involved in multi-agency global initiatives around standard setting. In humanitarian aid, Jo had a particular focus on how the most vulnerable are protected and integrated into effective responses. And for the last 7 years, Jo has been the director of the Blagrave Trust, whose mission is to bring lasting change to the lives of young people facing disadvantage, ensure their voices are heard in matters that affect them, and promote them as a powerful force for change. Jo is currently also a trustee of the Essex Community Foundation and sits on Comic Relief's Social Impact Committee. Jo, thank you very much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm really worried my internet connection is going to be unstable, but if it is, I'll just switch off my camera. Yeah, so I'm just going to say something about the Blagrave Trust, who we are and how we're living the values of empowering young people in our work, and share a bit about a fund that we launched last year that probably best articulates why we believe in this, because I think actions kind of speak as loudly as the theory. So we're a relatively small youth funder. We have a budget of about 3 million and an endowment of about 40 million, operating in England. And we're on a rapid kind of evolutionary journey from being focused on young people when I joined 7 years ago to being led by young people. And our demographic is, I guess, more young adults. So we fund work in the 14 to 25 space, but the work that we're doing directly with young people is more around 18 to 25s. So what being youth-led means to us as a funder, and how we've evolved means in practice, we have a highly diverse and young board. 2 of our trustees are young activists. All our trustees have significant lived experience of the issues we fund. 5 are first-time trustees. So we've reformed our governance in quite a radical way, and I think it's an incredibly important starting point, actually, if you're going to really live some of this. Then we fund a lot of work and make conscious and explicit efforts to listen to a range of young people, and invest specifically in the capacity of organisations in the youth space to do deeper listening work. I think listening goes to the heart of voice. Everyone has a voice. The question is whether we're actually listening. And we started to fund youth movements like Teach the Future, the climate strikes, and dipping our toe into more grassroots campaigning. And that has been pretty transformational in terms of the direction that we're going in now. And more parts of our work to help co-design it and actually make funding decisions on our behalf. We're almost moving from being a professional grant maker to being more a facilitator and a curator of other people's decisions. So it's hard to kind of quantify how transformational some of this has been for us. And at the same time, I wouldn't want to exaggerate it, but I think once you move in this direction, where in our case, young people are now at the centre of everything that we do, there's kind of no turning back, and it feels like we're riding a bit of a unstoppable, hopefully, wave to sharing power and looking at how we can support bridging the gap between decision makers and young people across a number of social policy areas. And I think it's important to start with our organisation, because I think some of the more progressive work that we're funding, we wouldn't have had the confidence to do if we hadn't evolved our governance in the first place and evolved our internal ways of working. I think it's given us huge confidence in the work that we're doing around investing in young people directly, which I'll talk about. And ultimately, as a funder, we didn't want to be part of the problem and part of a system that often feels tokenistic or even negligent, I would say, in how it allows young people to participate. So really briefly, why do we think young people can create positive benefit to society? Because that's ultimately what we're about. We're not about kind of personal development programs, you know, and we're not working with younger people. And the observations and reflections I have on that, basically, the key one is actually around relevance and us being fit for purpose. I think both because of the huge scale of the challenges facing young people at the moment, which have been exacerbated by COVID-19 no end, but were there before, in terms of climate justice, austerity in the UK, and many issues you're familiar with, mental health. And because the more we spent time with young people, the more we realized that on things like intersectionality, genuine inclusivity, diversity, equity, well-being and self-care, or the role of charities in society, young people actually were ahead of us. Their thinking and the things that they were bringing to us were challenging us in a way that felt incredibly important. And then the other thing is, as we started to fund some kind of grassroots youth movements, we became much more aware than we had been of young people ready to create change, which really opened our eyes to the potential. Young people, of course, have always been at the forefront of social change. And you know, youth social and political movements have always been prominent. But I think we hadn't thought enough about how we could support them in the here and now. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, I think it's important that we reflect on the risks of not doing this work. If we ignore young people, whether it be the concerns that they're expressing or the positive role that they want to play, then we're actually increasing the risk of increasing intergenerational inequity. And I think the kind of potential for, you know, this divide between the generations is growing ever stronger, and something we should be really mindful of. So really quickly, we launched a program for young activists last year, along with the Centre for Knowledge Equity, which I think many of you know Baljit Sandhu, who's a global Yale Fellow. And the purpose of the fund was to support young activists directly, not via charities, not via CICs, but directly to them who are activating their lived experience. And the fund was designed by paid young advisors, and they made the decisions. And I know I'm running out of time and there's so much to say, but basically the fund blew us away. We had 190 young people apply in a month, and all we really did was tweet out. It has shown us the number and scale of young people across the country who were already creating collectives and movements and social change who no one had ever funded before. So we're funding 30 young people, and we're definitely going to be carrying on and expanding. And they're campaigning on racial justice, advocacy and rights for care leavers, disability, migration, criminal justice reform, reclaiming community space, reform of education, and actually creating resources for young activists and campaigners, because they don't think that that knowledge and that resource are accessible to young people. I mean, it's been completely inspiring. And like I say, 190 incredibly strong applications that made us realize that that potential is out there, but nobody is really supporting it. So I think just to say, like, we have a huge amount to learn about what support young people need and what they can achieve. But make no mistake, the key thing for me is that the young people through Challenge and Change this program had started the journey without us, and they'll carry it on without us too. So as adults, like, we need to listen and stay humble and learn together with them to create those ripples that Tigra mentioned right at the beginning. Thank you.
Joe, thank you so much. I'm just going to invite everybody back and just comment on how great it was to get a real diversity of opinion in terms of the people that we have with us. We have Joe, your voice in terms of the funder perspective, which of course crucially important. Lucy, directly in the coalface, working in a school. Kaylee, you work within the ecosystem of youth sector and what you're doing from a macro perspective. Subra, you work directly in terms of interventions is incredible. But of course, we haven't, not that you're not young, we haven't heard from a young person. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome and introduce Alia Irabor York, a student from the greatest part of the UK, East London, and founder of the Pupil Power, to introduce herself, her movement, and provide some remarks. Alia was nominated for the 2020 Entrepreneur of Excellence Awards at the National Diversity Awards for her change-making and inspiring work that she delivers through Pupil Power. Alia is beyond passionate about all things education, politics, and policy, and supports and advocates for work that tackles educational inequality. And I believe, if I am right, as of 2 days ago, has had an offer accepted to go to Cambridge University, which is incredible and deserves a massive round of applause from everybody. So we're so delighted to have you with us. So Alia, we want to hear your thoughts, your remarks, and any immediate questions that you have for the group in front of you, who represent, I think, all parts of the ecosystem that places youth, or can place youth, at the real forefront of building our good society.
Wow, what a question. Well, I'm just going to start with introducing myself a little bit. Hello, everybody. I just want to give a massive thank you for me even being here, because I feel like the conversation is so important and so necessary. And as my camera was off, I was just sitting there nodding, thinking, okay, right, there is hope that adults are having these conversations. Organisations with a really big platform are really thinking about and being critical and being reflective about how they're initiating this relationship between young people. And so I just want to say thank you for that initially. I'm actually like kind of blown away the fact that, you know, sometimes it can feel like as a young person it's not happening, and it clearly is. So as you mentioned, thank you for the intro. I am a student and I also run the Pupil Power, which I founded after finishing my GCSEs in 2019. Pupil Power is a youth-led movement, and I simply started it because I didn't have a space like that. There's the consensus that there's a lot of organisations or a lot of movements or sort of initiatives that are very tokenistic, and they advocate for young people, but they really don't. They say they're all for young people, but the way in which they work, the way in which they organise themselves, and the structures that they have in place completely contradict that. And as a young person who loves getting involved as much as I can, and, you know, soaking up all the opportunities I can, I've definitely experienced that more often than not. And so Pupil Power for me, as much as it is, you know, about trying to reimagine education, drive forward social change, tackle inequality, and engage with other young people that are doing it, it's also something for me whereby I actually get to really do it in the best and genuine and authentic way possible. I'm really proud to say that young people, part of Pupil Power, represent all corners of the UK. We are an amazing bunch of young people that are so energetic, full of ideas, unapologetically ourselves. We don't come, you know, have to speak in a certain way. We're literally just ourselves, and we appreciate each other for that. And what we try and do is build relationships with people like you guys and other organisations and our teachers in order to bridge that gap and start moving forward with the sort of future of education that we all desire to be in, right? Again, I don't even know where to start in terms of my thoughts, because I'm so overwhelmed by the amazing ideas from Lucy talking about democratic schooling. To me, you know, I went to just a normal state school in East London, the complete opposite experience. So for me, listening to that, I'm like, why is that not happening? Like, why is everybody so still behind a little bit? And I just feel like the one thing I would say that it's really important that these conversations keep happening, and that sometimes it can feel really uncomfortable, but I have so much faith that the more we have these uncomfortable conversations and keep pushing forward, the more likely we are to be in a position whereby we are comfortable in the long term, right? And so my experience of education has always been about sort of challenging what's gone on, challenging the power structures that were most definitely present in front of me, whether that's SLT members, you know, directly shouting in my face and saying, you know, I'm SLT, you're a student, don't talk or don't respond, or just the things that just never really felt right to me. Pupil Power is sort of our opportunity to completely challenge that in the best way possible, not in a way that's, you know, creating a divide, but actually closing that gap, as I keep on saying. So just to quickly say, we do so much work. We've worked with policymakers, we lead national campaigns, we're working with other organisations to lead on legal challenges, as well as doing our own legal challenges as well against, you know, human rights. We looked at the United Nations Children's Convention rights, Article 12, and that was a massive issue that we realised that, you know, young people's voices were definitely not at the forefront. So we just tried to sort of create that space for ourselves, and it almost started where I attended a NAU event and signed up as a teacher or a counsellor, because I honestly couldn't be there because it was only an adult space. And if I didn't go to that event, People Power would not be where it is today. It wouldn't exist. And so that's just an example of the power young people can have, and also why it's so important that those spaces are there, because young people are fighting for those spaces. And if we can have your help, then it would just be amazing. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to go forward with and answer any other questions.
Let me come in and say thank you so much. So we've had some questions from the group, so I'll come and ask everybody. We have about, 10 minutes if we're being generous, because we like to keep it an hour. And this conversation doesn't end here, right? We have a platform because we want to continue it. And most importantly, we want to share good practice. And so the fact that you're all here, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for sharing. We have a question, which I think is a really important question, which I think Derry put in the context of human rights, but I want to put this in a much deeper way. We've seen over the course of 2020, and not just through Black Lives Matter and the resurgence of the movement, both in America and beyond, but also through the COVID impact in terms of its impact in particular communities more than others, which has really emphasized the issue of structural inequalities. And part of structural difficulties and challenges is when you have groups that may have influence or access to influence versus those who may not have. Often they are grouped in minority majority statuses. So broadly speaking, how do we ensure that we can prepare young people to deal with structural injustices that they may be compelled to participate in? And I think the point Derry makes here is a norm referenced GCSE system that is designed to fail 33% of entrants because of a normal distribution curve potentially. So, let me make that broader. How do we help address structural challenges that prevent our young people from getting to build in that good society that we're talking about? Sugra, I'll come to you first if that's okay.
I think one of the things really powerful for me is when young people are able to see themselves in the stories and the educational programs that we share with them, and they also are able to feed back and let us know what worked well, what could be done better, what sort of really resonated with them. And not just through our Speak Truth to Power program, I think in education generally, it can be very easy when you're a teenager or even younger to feel as though if you are from a minority community, if you are feeling oppression in a way that nobody else is really telling you is not okay, you can grow up thinking, is that normal? Is that how it's supposed to be for me? And what we try to do through the schools that we work with, because actually the schools that we work with are in socioeconomically deprived background geographies. So one of the things that we try to do is not only enable young people to see what they are experiencing and what they are feeling is real, and creating spaces to talk about that, not just amongst themselves, but to people who are elected to powerful positions. We also try to engage teachers. That whole sort of values in action piece is really important to me, because if teachers are living out their values, if they are living in alignment, they can also be much more authentic about tackling some of the inequalities that they see, quite frankly, in education. You have teachers complaining all the time.
Thank you so much. On that, I want to go to our teacher in Lucy and hear Lucy's perspective on how we address structural barriers that prevent young people that either they may know about or they may not even know that they don't know about, right? And it's that tautological issue that we almost have. So how do we do it? How do you do it? And you're on mute. Favorite phrase of 2020.
I knew that was going to happen. How do we do it? We do it because we borrow the freedom of an independent school, but we're a comprehensive school. And until we change the measures of the accountability system that hold us accountable to only one narrow defined measure of what is achievement, we don't have the space within the system for teachers to make relationships, to build those kind of that social and emotional learning that's so important, and to bring time into the school day and really get to know the young people. I've got tons more, but I'm sure you want other people to speak as well.
Thank you so much. And Kaylee, if I can come to you in terms of how you promote this level, coming from a much larger umbrella ecosystem perspective, it would be great to hear.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things for us. There's something around understanding and really acknowledging each young person's individual story and their voice and where they're coming from. In June, we launched a campaign called Young and Black, which was led by a group of young Black people who said, we don't have a platform to share our experiences of growing up young and Black in Britain. And that kind of then escalated, and that's now kind of led to lots of action. So there's something about having a platform to share your stories and know that through that your voice is going to be heard. And the second thing for me, I think it's about as adults with power, using that power to break down those barriers and create those opportunities so that young people don't have to face them. So like I said before, when we're going to these meetings with decision makers saying, yeah, we're not coming without a young person, or you don't need me, you need a young person. And as an adult with power in that situation, I'm able to kind of remove that barrier. So it's sort of having that commitment to do that.
Kaylee, thank you. And Ali, if I can come to you, and then I'll come to Joe after, and ask you the question that Kaylee's just mentioned, which is, I think often when you go to a space where you're not familiar with, there's often an imposter syndrome that anybody who's been a minority or is a minority faces and experiences. How have you, through your own story and the advocacy work that you do with your movement, how have you ensured that you have the confidence to go in and be your authentic self, and what can we all do to ensure a space where other young people that we let into our spaces because they are co-designed and deserve to be there and should be there also can be their authentic selves, even if it's challenging to us?
I think it just starts with dismantling this sort of I'm higher than you and you're lower. That can be quite literally, the layout of the room, for example, or it's just the atmosphere that's created. So I feel like young people want to be there. It's not that a lot of times it's, young people don't have the confidence, or we all have some sort of confidence. We want to be there. We've got ideas. We have a voice. But it just starts with most times the adults having to acknowledge, right, sometimes I might have to speak less, or sometimes I have to prioritize the young person before mine. And it can feel really unusual because historically that's not how, things work. But it is about having to put yourself in that uncomfortable position. And most importantly, just always challenging what's going on. And when you see something, not sitting back and just allowing it to happen, but allowing the young people in the room and in the space to really take control, really lead and share their voice, because that's what we want. I think we're full of ideas, and my biggest question is, what's the worst that's going to happen? What is the worst that's going to happen if you put a young person on the stage or give young person 5 minutes to speak? Honestly, what's the worst that's going to happen? So if there is anyone in this room that hasn't tried it, I really do dare you to do it, and make a pledge of how you can really turn this sort of conversation into an action in your own practice.
Yeah, thank you so much. Joe, if I can come to you, and maybe, I think Ali used the word priorities and prioritization. As somebody who is able to help support, how do you decide how you prioritize what's important in getting to the overall agenda of what we're talking about here, given that there are so many challenges that we're talking about, and then maybe also hearing your opinions about addressing the structural issues as well? Maybe they're related.
Yeah, well, we're kind of increasingly only about the structural stuff, and actually in terms of issues, we're issue agnostic, precisely because we're led by young people and because young people don't live their lives through silos. So we really resist kind of looking at thematic issues, which can be complicated as well. I mean, just because it hasn't been mentioned already, there's a couple of other things I'd just add in. I mean, one, I think one of the big reflections we have is how much inspiration young people get from each other, not from us. And the more that we connect young people across movements, across social justice work, the more that they feel actually emboldened to take this stuff forward. So it's about how we collaborate and join the dots, as always, to actually really create systemic change. And the other thing is on kind of youth leadership. I guess there's a whole piece around political leadership and young people that is, in the UK anyway, not invested in at all. Which is something that we're beginning to look at in Blowgrave, and we could do a lot more about. And this isn't about hero leaders either. You know, one of the things Challenge and Change has really challenged us on is that there are young people in every community across the country that want to create structural change around issues that they feel are unjust.
Joe, thank you. And so we've run out of time, but I'm going to give everybody, I hope, 20 seconds, if you could, and ask you the question. I'm always inspired when I think about the change that needs to happen in our world. Inevitably, actually, it's adults that are causing the issues in terms of sustainability and the environment, equality. You're right, we're being led by our young people across the globe, and it's always been the case. And so I want to ask the question to you all. If you had, you know, a genie in a lamp and you could address one issue and only one issue from your perspective, what would that be? What is the one thing that you would do if you had unlimited resource, so that we could get a sense of where perhaps we should be focusing our energies? And I know there's so much more, but I'd love to try and hone in on that. So perhaps I can go to Sugra first.
One of the things that sort of comes to mind as you say that is that I hope that we realize how incredibly deeply interconnected we all are across the globe and beyond, and that our actions, our thoughts, anything that we do has a significant impact on others, around, not just immediately around us, but around the world.
Thank you so much. Kaylee?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about sort of taking that ownership as adults and like kind of really putting that commitment to actually listening and taking action, and not just having it as a tokenistic measure that we need to have young people's voice.
Thank you so much. Lucy?
I would give all adults the lens shift that allows them to work in partnership with young people to come to mutual solutions, and not to see young people as something to be controlled, but to work together with from baby up.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just build on that, I guess, and say, and not be afraid of young people. I think there's an element of young people's radicalism, like in the space that we're working in, that adults are quite afraid of. But every adult I know who's taken the time to work with those young people end up completely inspired and want to do way more.
Brilliant. And of course, Alia, you will absolutely have the last word.
Yeah, again, just building off what everybody said, just be in a space where both adults and young people can reimagine together and build the future of education together collaboratively.
Fantastic, thank you. And I want to also quickly say thank you to Malcolm, to Gary, to Emily, to Derry, to Ahmed, who've made comments in the group that we may not have addressed. And a special shout out to my friend Nikki from Newcastle, who has an amazing organization called Try Life that's worth checking out, which does incredibly interactive ways of engaging folks into a lot of through immersive experiences into issues. So thank you so much for joining us. And the last thing I think I'll say is, I mean, from my own experience, when we talk about building the good society, often the good society actually exists often within our young people's communities themselves, right? And it's actually as you just ascend or descend, depending on how you want to look at it, into adulthood, that we then start just moving away from the good society. So I think there's a lot for us to learn. Thank you all so much for your time. I know this has not been enough. We've just scratched the surface. I hope we can continue this conversation in our online fora, continue to learn good practice from each other and around the world. Over to you, Emma.
So I just want to say thank you to Sugra, to Lucy, to Kaylee, to Joe, and really, lastly, to Alia for really showing us the role that young people can have in promoting and helping us build the good society if we give them a platform and listen to them. So thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.